Bandai, despite holding some amazing licensing agreements with some of the biggest anime and manga franchises of all time, is still the lead provider of many mediocre Famicom games. Sure, there's smellier Kasuge on the console, but no other company so far guaranteed a subpar game with every title. And because such big franchises are on the console, they end up racking up a lot of sales. So sorry to say, unlike book publishing or music recording companies that hop on the video game bandwagon and mostly make a shallow splash, Bandai could keep pushing forward because there's enough of a fan base to buy that Kinnikuman game. Of course, nowadays through merging with Namco, they managed to put out a ton of great anime licensed games. Or at least a ton of fun ones for fans of that franchise, Jump Force included. But of course for now, it's time to once again dig our hands into another pile of could have been better mush. Well actually today, we are not covering a bad game from Bandai. Yeah, what a shock, but even more of a shock is that this game is actually one of the more impressive looking games on the Famicom so far, and is also absolutely wonderful in the presentation department. It's Kidou Senshi Z-Gundam Hot Scramble. If you're familiar with Japanese pop culture, then chances are you're familiar with Gundam, the massively huge mecha anime series that would define the mecha genre. Created in 1979 with the first anime series, Mobile Suit Gundam, with the idea created by Yoshiyuki Tomino and, well, actually a bunch of rotating employees at the animation studio Sunrise. But Tomino did direct the series, so if the shoe fits. While the original series was not an initial success, it was actually through Bandai's help buying up a licensing deal, manufacturing model kits of the mechas to help build its true audience of teenagers and adults, as well as the show entering the rerun market, helped it become a huge success for years to come. So when it was time to make a sequel, now a lot more eyes would be watching. Which would come 6 years later in 1985, with Mobile Suit Z-Gundam, and I guess essentially a season 2 following the events at the end of Zeta, with Mobile Suit Gundam ZZ. From what I can gather, many fans consider Zeta either the best or easily one of the best of the franchise, taking what worked from the original series but adding in elements to make it really grand. A darker tone, great character development, and actually addressing that war is not all fun and games like it is in Advance Wars. Zeta's legacy is still being felt to this day, as a sequel manga series called Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam Define continues on with the story, being printed in Gundam Ace magazine, a manga magazine that prints, as expected, Gundam manga. With Define actually debuting in 2011, and as of this video is still going strong to this day. Alright, look, I don't have a lot of interest in Gundam to be perfectly honest, so I'm sorry if this sounds weird to a seasoned Gundam fan. But what I am familiar with is video games, and today we'll be talking about the first console Gundam game, Kidou Senshi Z-Gundam Hot Scramble, which actually has a bit more history than most other Famicom games. So you know the deal with Bandai so far. Grab Tosei to do a quick job and then sell it to the kids to make a huge profit. No actually, not today. We have a more interesting company behind the wheel on this title, even if their name isn't that creative. Game Studio. That was their name, and by God is it standard. Maybe it sounds more exciting in Japanese. But with such a standard name, what makes this studio, this game studio, stand out? Well, do you remember a guy named Masanobu Endo? If you watched early episodes of this series, you probably have. Basically, he created two massive hits for Namco in the early 80s with Xevious and the Tower of Draga. Two games I bring up to this day because of how influential they were to gaming. And he created both. In a world before we glamorized video game designers, and even before Shigeru Miyamoto being the most famous video game designer out of Japan, Endo was essentially the first rock star of video games. Like here he is doing an interview for the Famicom port of Xevious.
遠藤正信さんは26歳。彼のゲームソフトに対する考え方には独特の哲学があり、新人類の騎士と呼ばれています。
技術的に言いますとね、あのゲーム非常に遅いわけですね。こうゆっくり流れてくるとかね、敵がこうゆっくり飛んでくるとかね、敵の弾もこうゆっくり飛んでくるとかいろいろあるわけなんですね。
And here he is in the commercial of today's game.
遠藤正信がゼータガンダムに命を吹く。あなたがゼータの鼓動を聞け。機動戦士ゼータガンダムホットスクランブル。
Shortly after Draga, Endo decided to go solo, creating his own game studio. And Game Studio, essentially went right back to Namco to make more games for them, including more games for the Jiraga series, or Babylonian Castle Saga if you will. But before that, Game Studio's first game would be an adaptation of the very popular Z-Gundam series, with Endo at the design front of things, alongside another designer, Satoshi Naito, who also worked on the Jiraga series. You start the game and get... oh, an FBI warning. Sorry, EBI warning, whoever they are. And it has this nice fade-in effect. It actually looks really good, but I'm a little concerned. Do they know I'm playing a pirated copy? Am I going to get one of those anti-piracy screens if I play long enough? Let's just skip that so we can get into the backstory scroll in case you haven't watched the anime. Although I do recommend watching it yourself because this goes way too fast. And then we get these nice introduction scenes featuring some of the enemies in the game with their stats. They have a nice fly-in effect, and I have to say, this is really nice production to get not only fans but casual gamers into the game. And then there's the title screen. So getting into the game... oh, it's still going. Going for a long time. Alright, enough of that. Getting into the game proper, it starts off as a first-person shooter, or at least what the concept of a first-person shooter would be in 1986. While not very impressive at first, it looks like someone spat up 3D World Runner. Eventually the Gundam, I'm assuming, takes to the air and arrives in space, and oh my goodness. This actually looks pretty damn amazing. All the stars coming towards you and the 2 planets in the background. I'm honestly speechless. This looks so impressive, and I bet it wasn't even that hard to program. Sometimes the littlest things can bring great pleasures. So you continue to shoot at some guys until you come across a space station and zoom towards it. And the game becomes... Thexter. Yeah, it's Thexter. You're a robot side-scrolling across these same tiles and you can turn into a flying jet. I mean, yeah, it's Thexter. A strange choice of a game to rip off, but hey, at least it's the best Thexter game on the Famicom, so what's there to complain? In this section you scroll around a mini maze looking for upgrades to face the first boss of the area, this power source I guess. It doesn't attack unless you attack first, so you shoot and dodge until you win. Then you repeat everything again, just a little bit harder, with the maze of Thexter sections being a little more convoluted. And to be honest, I'm not sure how to properly say if I think this is a good game or not. Don't get me wrong, it's nothing god-awful or downright bad, but everything I said is pretty much the whole game. Fly, go to space, Thexter, boss, repeat. And it gets a bit dull after a while. There's even a way to fast forward by holding down the B button, which doesn't seem to make the sections go by faster, it just speeds everything up for some reason. So yeah, on one hand, it's just nothing too outstanding. On the other hand, everything else is just fantastic. The graphics, the presentation, and even the music. Getting a game over isn't just a little fanfare, it's like a full song. So you can see why I'm in this middle ground on how to feel about it. But if I think of games like those on the Atari 2600, I can see why a game like this could stand out. 1986, as I said before, is sort of the puberty stage of video games, where they strip away a lot of the archaic roots and become more full-fledged. And I think Hot Scramble is a great representation of the 1986 landscape, that managed to have a lot of elements to it to have it stand out. It was even one of the few games to get a Famicom Mini version during the whole NES Famicom nostalgia on the Game Boy Advance. Remember those NES ports to Game Boy Advance we got here in the West under the NES Classic series? Well, in Japan, you would actually get a recreated Famicom/Famicom Disk System box in the packaging to make it more nostalgic. Which, yeah, we definitely got shafted on that, but at least you can play Zelda 2 on the GBA. But the Hot Scramble port was actually very rare and only given out as a raffle prize to those who purchased Kidou Senshi Gundam Senshi Tashi no Kiseki on the GameCube with only 2,000 copies made for it. A bit strange to make this specific game a rare prize, but still amazing altogether. But not as amazing to the fact there's another version of Hot Scramble with a low copy amount. But what makes it even more amazing is that it was released on the Famicom. Dubbed the final version, only 1,000 copies were ever produced, making it one of the rarest commercially sold video games ever. If you want a copy, you're gonna have to skip paying rent for the next year or so. However, there's a slightly different game on this cartridge than just the color. This version ditches the Thexter levels altogether and gives us a straightforward first-person shooter where you have to destroy enough adversaries to continue on to the next level. In comparison to the more common version, I guess it loses a bit of personality, but at the very least it's a lot more straightforward compared to the original. And there's some more flavor to this game than what you would expect, like running out of weapon energy and getting your limbs weakened. But much like the standard version, it kinda gets dull after a while. Maybe not worth selling your house to get a copy. Actually seeing the comparison of these two versions make me think a little bit of executive meddling was in place. Because this was not the first Z-Gundam game. That honor goes to the game released a year before, Hot Scramble in 1985, with a simply titled name, Mobile Suit Gundam Z, for the FM7 computer. That was just a straight up clone of Thexter. What if this final version Endo and his team made was the original concept until Bandai requested a Thexter clone to be added in to be a lot like the 1985 game? It's a possibility. If I had to choose what I liked more between the two versions, I'd probably go with the standard version since it shows off the graphical power more, but I still find both titles a very good showcase of video game advancements. Hot Scramble is still one of the most interesting titles of the 1986 Famicom library, even if the game doesn't stand out too much aside from being a first-person shooter before Wolfenstein 3D. I don't know how much I recommend it in this day and age, but if you have some interest in the Famicom's history, then it should definitely be a game to give at least a try.